Hey guys, welcome to Appalachia's Homestead. Tara here making bread tonight. The wood stove is cranking high, so we've got it going. The temperatures are very low, so when I have an opportunity to utilize my wood stove for cooking, not only just to enjoy and to save on electricity and different things like that, but it also helps me in, making my skill sets better. So that's what we're doing. As you know, I'm always continuing to try to be a better bread maker. So this is what we're going to do. I love making this bread. I started making this style of bread several years ago, even before we moved up here. So there's a multitude of recipes online. If you type in Dutch oven crusty bread or something like that, everybody and their mama has a different variety or a different way to make this. They're very similar, but they're very alike too. So here's what I do. I'm going to use about 6 cups of flour. The reason being is because I want to try to make a double batch. Now I use a large Dutch oven. I don't use a little tiny, little like 2-quart deal. I have one, I like it, but we go through bread so fast that, I'm just wanting to maximize my productivity. So we'll show you how we do that. Sometimes it turns out perfect, sometimes it turns out pretty good, and sometimes once in a blue moon it doesn't turn out that well. So let's pray this one turns out really good. What I've done already to make life easy for filming, since I'm making this and filming at the same time, is I've gone ahead and pre-measured 6 cups of your plain all-purpose flour. Okay, so that's in here. I'm going to mix everything else in there. The next thing you're going to want to do is add salt. Now some recipes for this, some recipes call for up to 4 tablespoons of salt. I don't. I'm just going to sprinkle in about 2. All right. Then I'm going to add in a full tablespoon of yeast. So this is kind of like your dry goods, if you will. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to mix that up. Okay, you're going to want to get that really light and fluffy and moving through. If you don't, you're going to take a bite and it's going to be extremely salty. So the salt is really an issue in terms of making sure you've mixed it into your different portions of your flour. So that's what we're going to do. At this point, you would also want to add herbs. So if you wanted to add thyme or rosemary or all kinds of different things, oregano or different basil, whatever. If you like herbs, herb bread, I love rosemary myself. But this would be the point in which you would probably want to do that, because once it gets wet, it's not going to be as evenly dispersed. So I'm just trying to mix this through and whatnot. That's pretty easy, guys, okay? The next big thing you're obviously going to add is moisture, so that's going to be your water. I've gone ahead and pre-measured 3 cups, 1, 2, 3, 3 cups of lukewarm water, and that means, it's not going to, your wrist, it just feels warm to the wrist. You don't want it to hurt the yeast, so you're going to pour that in there, okay? Pretty simple, people. I love making this recipe because literally, I think I've had one mix turn out not so hot, but other than that, it's just like almost no fail. I like that, and it's easy and simple to make. I'm going to add in about a tablespoon, roughly. These are big spoons, so I'm going to add in some honey. Some recipes call for sugar, some recipes call for honey, some recipes call for oil, some call for none. It just depends upon what you like, okay? So I'm just sort of mixing that, letting that drizzle in there. This is local honey. Best way to get it if you can. All right, I'm going to pause here simply because I'm going to mix it and then show you what it looks like. All right, guys, I've pretty much mixed everything together. Everything that you saw there, the 6 cups of flour, then a little bit of salt and the yeast. I added in the water and a little bit of honey, and I've mixed it all in. You're going to notice that it's very sticky. It's very sticky. It's kind of shaggy. It's very rustic. You just want to leave it alone. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it in plastic wrap, or like your cling wrap. Just wrap it over really good. And what I'm going to do is take it and I'm going to set it actually in the next room where my wood stove is, where that room is nice and toasty, 70, 72 degrees. Keep it going all night so that it can do what it needs to do. You want to have this sit. Depends on how much of a sour taste you want to it. I like for mine to sit for around 12 hours, but I'll enjoy it up to 24 as well. So we're going to let it sit overnight, see how it goes tomorrow. We're going to have to make sure that the wood stove is at least at 350. Again, some people will tell you 350 for a certain time. Some folks will tell you to cook it up to 475. It depends on how you're cooking it. So we're going to try it tomorrow, and we'll see how it goes. All right, guys, we are about 14 hours later. Okay, we are the next day or 14 hours later. I wanted to show you what this is looking like. I left this to rise and to prepare in the actual room where the wood stove is. I didn't set it on the wood stove. It was a good 6 or 8 feet away on a ledge or like on a shelf. But you can see it's done really nicely. If I'd left this in my kitchen on my cold countertop, not sure we'd have these results. So you do want a nice warm condition for it to rise and to activate. So I'm going to peel this back, and it's sticky. But what you're going to be looking for is that it has come to the top. It's moist, and you see all of the bubbles. Okay, you see all that? So this is what we're going to be working with. So the next phase is obviously coming in and bringing in our Dutch oven. We use a large Dutch oven, and that is actually warming up on the wood stove. If you're using a wood stove, you're going to want it to be around 350 or so, okay? If you're using a conventional oven, you're probably going to want to heat that to at least 450. Again, all the recipes that you see and whatnot vary a little bit. So we're going to jump to the next phase. I'm going to put this down right here, and we'll show you what we're going to do. I'm excited. I hope this turns out good. All right, before we place the dough into the Dutch oven, I want to show you what we've done here. I've actually had the Dutch oven sitting in here heating up on the stove. Now, this may be too hot. This is my bottom level of the low pie. Yes, it's dusty. Actually, this looks pretty good, but when you're dealing with all of this, it's very difficult to keep perfectly clean. This is what it looks like. But my Dutch oven has legs, okay? And you can see some nice dust under there and wood ash and whatever. So I'm thinking that, because of that, you're probably not going to have as much heat generating on it. It's like having a trivet underneath it. So what the point is, I'm going to have to watch the bread. When you're cooking with this type of conditions, it's not about what you do in terms of what you know with a conventional oven. You're going to have to watch it. You're going to have to monitor it. You're going to have to finesse it. That's part of your responsibility. So I may have to vary from this level to this level. That's what we're doing today. All right, let's take this in here. This has been heating up. You want your Dutch oven to heat up. You want it nice and warm. We're going to put the dough in there and let it maybe rise a little bit, and then we're going to get busy. All right, guys, we've brought the Dutch oven into the kitchen. It is very, very warm. You want that. I have the lid on, but I'm going to take it off. I'm going to prepare this. So always make sure you've got your mittens. Don't burn yourself. So we're going to move this over. It's very, very hot. We're going to put that in there. Now, what I like to do, I found out the hard way. I've tested a couple of things. I like to use parchment paper. Regardless of what size or how many loaves you're making, I think parchment paper is the way to go. We're going to be using 2 pieces of parchment paper, and I'm going to show you why here in a minute. Now, this is going to get messy, so be prepared. I'm leaving the lid over here. I'm going to make 2 dough balls, if you will, okay? Not just one. So you're going to want to separate this. If you were just making one, you would take out the whole thing, okay? And you would be, rolling them over. I'm not going to do that. I don't care if this looks rustic. That's the whole goal to me. So what I'm going to do is just separate this because I'm going to put both in there. I'm just using some of the flour here to help separate. You can see what it's looking like here. Some folks take it out because you'll have one and then they'll roll it over. I'm not going to worry about that. Some folks even, this is the end of the flour, so some folks even take it and dust it with cornmeal. It depends on what you like. You can use flour or cornmeal. So they'll take it and they're going to form it. You can see how it's turning out here. So you have to work with it. You're going to have to pull it away. It's a little bit sticky, but that's why we have flour. And they're not going to be perfectly rounded shapes when they come out, okay? Because they're going to be sitting side by side. If you have the smaller little smaller Dutch oven, it'll make the perfect rounded shape. I mean, it's beautiful. And I love that, but why make one at a time when I can make 2? This is the very end of this flour. I saved it for this. So I'm just dusting it, forming it over. It is sticky. And I'm going to put it on one side. Okay, one side. one loaf for us is, woo, hot, is not enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of parchment paper. This might be a little bit too big, so I'm going to fold it. That's okay. And I'm going to set it right there. You'll see what I'm doing in just a minute. And it's not perfect, and I'm not going to get burned. All right, so let me get down here this last little bit of flour. So it was 10 degrees this morning, so we're beautiful in coveralls and beanies and thick socks, wool socks, and all of this and the above. So this is going to be perfect for later. This is my favorite bread. Regardless of what breads I've made and what breads I've tried, I will have to admit to you, this is my favorite bread, okay? The reason I'm putting the parchment paper in between them is literally so they don't stick together when they're baking, because if they do, this section over here and this section over here doesn't bake. All right, so then at that point, if you wanted to dust it just a little bit, cornmeal or a little bit more flour or whatever, that's fine. So these are gonna rise. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the lid on it for just a few minutes. I'm gonna try to start getting it to rise up a little bit, and then we're gonna put it on the heat. Now what you're gonna do is take it in there, I've got flour on it, you're gonna take it in there, and you're gonna let it sit for when it bakes, it's gonna bake for about 50 minutes. If you bake it in the oven at 450 or whatnot, 475, it's gonna actually bake for about 50 minutes. You have to eyeball that. Then you can judge whether, at that point, how crusty your bread is. You can take the lid off and let it cook some more. But cooking this on a wood stove is up to me. So I'm gonna have to finesse which shelf it stays on, what is the temperature, how long. So it could be a little bit less, it could be a little bit more. So let's see how it goes. All right, guys, so we started this right at 11:40. It is 12:03, so let's see how we're doing here with the bread. We are still at about 500, so let's see how we're doing here. All right, it's hot. Oh, yes, looking good. All right, we just want to check and monitor how our progress is going. We'll keep it a-rocking. All right, guys, so we are at approximately, we got to the 50-minute to 1 hour mark, okay? A lot of bread, a lot of dough in this Dutch oven, okay? So I'm going to show you, they're high and they're very firm, but we're not to that final crispiness that we want. So we're actually going to place it inside the wood stove. Now it's cranking. A lot of folks, when they do this, they put it inside the wood stove after the fire has started to really die down and you have a lot of strong coals. Well, we've got both. So we're going to test both here because we've got a lot of bread to bake, but we're going to keep an eye on it. Let's pray on it and see how she turns out. If it's not perfect, we don't stress because we understand we're dealing with homemade bread, number one, a Dutch oven, number two, and number three, you're dealing with that. So we're going to make it work. Well, I thought I'd show you how this bread's turning out. Clearly, we're going to have to make a second batch. Clearly, the timing is everything. Finessing your fire is everything. So after we put this in for a 5 to 10 minute quick little finish off bake, and as you can clearly see, it was working beautifully. No sticking, complete separation with the loaves. There's still heat coming off these things. The whole 9 yards. My husband checked the barn. We do barn checks often. We do that for the safety of our barn. We do that for the safety of the animals. Well, since it got 10 degrees last night, we turned the water off. And we turned the water back on this morning, and we were having an issue with it coming out of the faucet. Well, somewhere it had still, kind of frozen up. So he turned it on. We walked away. Well, it decided to run, and start overflowing into the stall. Well, that took an extra 5 or 7 minutes of us scurrying around. By the time I realized the time that was going on, this is what happened. So we're going to make another loaf. We're going to do the exact same thing you saw before, and we're going to make it the exact same way. The final bake is your final crustiness. Okay, right there. You can see the inside of these loaves. Look here, the inside, perfect, beautiful, gorgeous. And it's going to be on the next batch too. So we're going to try this again. So homesteading is not perfect, ever. Learning skills has a lot of burning the biscuits, burning the bread, having accidents, getting distracted. It's just part of it. Let's try it again. All right, just made another whole big batch. Got it covered, ready for it to sit. We're going to go at this again. and we will record for you our success. We'll see how it goes. All right, guys, so it is much later in the evening. It's actually 11 p.m., but I'm determined to test this whole bread in the Dutch oven with the wood stove, not a wood cook stove, but just a plain old wood stove, a brand, really nice low pie, trying to finesse how to make bread. I looked at some articles, and they talk about making the bread in the Dutch oven on top with just a lid. Found out today, no ma'am. In order to finish this process, you're going to have to do one of two things. You're going to have to get it down into the wood box, into the firebox, or, as I've come to the conclusion, you're going to have to flip it like a biscuit. Now, some people make their bread and then they place it into the wood, into the actual firebox, as the coals are, hot, but there's no active fire to cook the bread. That may actually work in theory. But at the same time, if it's 10 degrees outside and I'm wanting to heat my house, which is what we're doing right now, we don't run the heat, we run the wood fire stove. We run the wood stove, and I want to make bread, then I'm going to have to work with the fact that I've got a really hot stove going on. So what I'm going to do, instead of putting it in here, which I know works, it's just you have to monitor your time. In fact, I would be willing to bet that it's less than 5 minutes. But I'm going to flip it like a biscuit. We're going to see how this works. It's how I make my biscuits. Works like a charm, works beautifully. And you can see we've got really firm bread, really nice browning on the bottom and crusting. So we're going to go for this and see how it works. All right, guys, we're going to close this video out. It takes a failure in a lot of things in order to learn what you have to change in order to get it right. We did that today, okay? When I make biscuits, I have to flip the biscuits. That is how we approach this. When I make this type of bread in a conventional oven, you simply place it in there, you let the oven do the work for you, and then for about 30 minutes, and then you decide if you want to remove the lid or not to make the bread a little bit more crispy if you decide. It does all the work for you. You have to work a wood stove. It's up to you to decide how your food is going to turn out. It's not doing it for you. It forces you to do the work, to do the checking, to do the finessing. You can bake bread very easily inside the firebox. Folks do it all the time with a wood cook stove. This is not a cook stove. This is a wood stove. So we're having to improvise and learn how to cook on it for now until we get a cook stove in the kitchen. So I decided instead of using the firebox, I don't want my fire to die down. It's 15 degrees outside. It's midnight. We're doing a project. We're trying to learn how to do this and make it exactly how we like it. So I said, instead of putting it back letting this all die down and then having to rebuild it back up, let's flip it. So that is what we did. So I made the bread the same way, cooked the bread. Everything was the exact same the second time around, except when I got to 50 minutes and it was firm, it was really crispy on, nice and firming up and crispy on one side, but still a little bit doughy on the top, I flipped it. You cannot leave this just sitting on top and it's going to cook all magically by itself. You have to check it, you have to finesse it, and you have to make decisions. If your fire cooks down and you then want to time it and put it in the wood box, do that. But do understand the fire and the coals and everything that you're dealing with inside your wood stove is not the same as the temperature on top. So learning to make bread is one thing, learning to make it in a conventional oven is another. Working with wood is a whole other world. We appreciate you watching at Appalachia's Homestead. We appreciate you being here. Like and subscribe if you like what you see. We appreciate you coming along with us on our journey, our failures and our triumphs. It's what it's all about. It's a new, generation of homesteaders, and we're learning, and that's what we're here for. So check us out on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. My kids, they should be in bed, but they want some bread. We'll talk to you soon, and take care.